There you go.
When he does that, the PowerPoint goes away, so maybe you can...
Okay, now let's see here. Camera one, let's see here. Camera. Now you're good, Dennis. Have a good class.
Don't leave us, Dan.
Hi, Jenny.
I take it everybody hasn't come in yet, right?
Right.
All right. Well, I hate to get started without everybody coming in.
Here they come.
All right, very good. Good to see everybody. Come on in. How you doing?
Good. Hey.
That's George and God Owen.
George is here. You can start now.
How you doing?
Go ahead.
All right, is that about everybody that's coming in? All right, let's go ahead and get started. It's good to see everybody again tonight. Appreciate all of you coming to class tonight. Even though we said that we were going to go to hell tonight, you still came to the class, and so appreciate that. And I told Dan we're probably going to stay in hell at least 3 weeks, but we are coming out after that. So that'll be a good thing. When we talk about the biblical doctrine of hell, we can see that when we look at there have been a lot of cartoons, and I recognize that it's probably a little hard for you to see exactly what's on this particular cartoon, so I'm going to describe it to you, and then you can kind of make sense of what you're looking at. But the idea is, in this cartoon, is what kind of people are going to be in hell. And in the left door, you've got homicidal maniacs, and then in the middle door, it's labeled terrorists, and then you can see Satan is sending somebody into that right door, and what it says there, people who drove too slow in the fast lane.
I must have missed something when I stepped out of the room there.
So, lots of different cartoons, and some of them really are quite humorous. But we all know the truth of the matter is that hell itself is no laughing matter, and it could be something that we get to where it becomes something that is not taken as seriously as it needs to be. The fact of the matter is, there is much confusion in the religious world regarding hell. Here is a book that I have in my library that is, as you can see, is entitled 4 Views on Hell, and you probably can't read the various 4 views that are described here, but you've got literal, metaphorical, purgatorial, and conditional, and then you have 4 different authors that are all talking about those particular positions of which those particular authors personally believe in. And only one of the 4 is a literal view of hell, and the particular author that has that is not exactly someone I would trust. He's very well known for the doctrine of premillennialism, which we talked about last week. But the fact of the matter is, there's much confusion in the religious world about the subject of hell. Many different opinions, and these opinions are now being found in the Lord's church as well. It is said that the Bible speaks of hell 5 times more than it speaks of heaven. Now, I don't know if that surprises you or not. I haven't personally counted, but those are some statistics that I've read in some publications. Because the fact of the matter is, the Scriptures are full of examples of divine punishment for sin. Therefore, it ought not to surprise us that God is going to punish again, and that God is going to talk about that a day of punishment is coming. So when we think about just the idea of hell, especially in the world today, there's a lot of different ideas. Sometimes the reality of hell and the degree of suffering in hell is skewed by statements and concepts of men. We've probably all heard of the statement, hell on earth. He's going through hell on earth, or she's going through hell on earth. Well, initially the statement means that someone's going through some really hard times and a lot of difficulties going on. But are these hard times literally equivalent to what a person is going to experience in hell? Well, of course not. But before long, we begin to think, wrongly, I might add, that such earthly difficulties are similar to, or maybe equal to, what one might experience in hell. But such couldn't be further from the truth. Also, there are some that believe that the difficulties that they go through in this life is their hell. And that's the only hell that they're going to go through, is those periods of difficulty that God is punishing him or punishing her now. And there won't be a place that one will go to later. As a matter of fact, some believe that the level of difficulty that you go through while here on earth is basically the compensation or the penalty, the punishment's taking place now, and then there won't be anything left except reward. And so you suffer now, you get reward later, but this is not a teaching that's in harmony with the Bible. Some of the preachers during the Restoration period were noted for sermons that they preached on hell. Jonathan Edwards is one of those that was famous for some of his sermons on hell. As a matter of fact, history records that he was such a powerful orator, and he had such an amazing way of framing things that there were people that would run from the church building screaming and crying and pulling their hair out, and a lot of people would come forward and they would beg that God would forgive them and pray for them. But this is just one sample of a sermon that Jonathan Edwards preached about hell, and you can just imagine the impact that this might have. The pit is prepared. The fire is made ready. The furnace is now hot, ready to receive them. The flames do now rage and glow. The glittering sword is bent and held over them, and the pit has opened her mouth under them. O sinner, consider the fearful danger that you are in. And as Jonathan would go and weave this description of hell, and the people would start sweating, and they would believe that somehow or another the temperature was raised 20 or 30 degrees. But he was just so good at describing the horrors of hell. Bertrand Russell, some years ago, as a British philosopher, produced an essay that was titled, "Why I Am Not a Christian." And one of the reasons that he cited was the fact that Jesus, the founder of Christianity, believed in hell. He said, I can't believe in Christianity because the founder of Christianity believed in hell. But what's interesting about that is, on the one hand, it's tragic that Bertrand Russell had this kind of negative view about hell, but at least he could see, when he looked at the Bible and he looked at the teachings of Jesus, that the Bible did teach that there was a hell. And there are some of our brethren that can't even figure that much out. But this man that didn't even believe in God could clearly see that the Bible does in fact teach about a real place that bad people that are in opposition to the will of God are going to go. Here is a newspaper article that is a couple years old. You can see the title of it, The Catholic View of Hell Changes. Well, the Bible clearly uses judgment and punishment terminology. Yet supposed Bible-believing people categorically reject what the Bible has to say about it. And the Catholic Church is one illustration among many where this is exactly what has taken place. As a matter of fact, looking at a quote that comes out of this particular newspaper article, it said the decline in the belief in hell is one of the most important changes in our, that is Catholic, history. The Reverend Martin Marty, church historian and professor at the University of Chicago, said, the punishment of fire was listed by just 3% of the respondents. And so this massive Catholic survey was done all around the world, and they're asking, do you believe in a literal hell? Only 3% of the Catholics that responded to that particular survey said yes. Later on in the article, it says that Pope John Paul II told an audience at the Vatican that, quote, rather than a place, hell indicates the state of those who freely and definitively separate themselves from God. All right, so it's not a place. It's just a description of people that have chosen to live counter to the will of God, separating themselves from God and His will. Now, what's interesting about this is that even the Pope changed long-standing Catholic doctrine regarding the reality of hell as a place. Because prior to this was not the belief of the Catholic Church, but rather their belief was more founded in what the Scriptures teach as far as hell being a literal place. But Pope John Paul II then redefined that. So now it is more akin to what we were talking about just a minute ago, and that's the concept of hell on earth, and that's pretty much the position that John Paul got started, and the Catholic Church has embraced ever since. Later on in the article, it says, in a sense, explains the Reverend Stephen Happel, interim dean of religious studies at the Catholic University of America in Washington, the Pope is telling us that we can recover some measured, intelligent understanding of hell that makes sense for the 21st century. All right, now I don't know if you can read that and see all of the import of that particular quote, but to me, that is an amazing statement. That the Pope is telling us that we can recover some measure of an intelligent understanding of hell that coincides better with modern man. Well, so the whole dynamic of hell, the reality of hell, the description of hell, is something that's not rooted and grounded in Scripture, but rather it's something that has to do with the way people feel about it. And as we become more intellectual, then that intellect is leading us away from what the Bible says. Well, that's not a news flash. That doesn't surprise any of us. That's been going on for a long time. As we become puffed up in our own knowledge, understanding, and scientific discovery and so on, it's very typical that people move away from what the Bible has to say. But I find it interesting that the old view was not an intelligent understanding of hell. And so if you happen to be someone that believes that hell is a literal place, well, according to this U.S. News and World Report, quote, that's not an intelligent viewpoint at all, that you're way behind the times. You know, kind of on a side note, things like this also indicate the place that the Bible occupies in the minds of a lot of people in the religious world today. It no longer is viewed as the final say. Whereas there was a time, at least in Christianity, in a general sense, using the term Christianity, that the Bible was the final say, and if that's what it said, then that settled it, and there were no more disputes or arguments from that point on. But now the Bible could say, in this case, whatever it wants to say about hell, and our intelligence makes us say, well, what the Bible says is not reality. What the Bible is teaching about hell is something that needs to be put in another category, and that's where we get to that book that I showed the cover of just a minute ago, the 4 different views. Well, it's figurative. Maybe there's kind of a purgatorial view where there's kind of a waiting place that you're going to go. Maybe God will slap you on the hand for 1,000 years, and then you'll be able to live in heaven. You know, all sorts of views. But one thing I didn't say when we were talking about those various views, except the literal view, that is that all of these other views cut man a tremendous amount of slack, where if there's not going to be a hell at all, or if there is going to be a hell, it's not going to be that bad, or if there is a hell and it is bad, you won't be there for long. And so any way you look at it, they're trying to make it work out more in favor for the way mankind looks at hell or feels about hell. This is another magazine that is widely distributed, and the front cover of this famous, familiar religious magazine is asking the question, and they're asking the legitimate one. Were you told the truth about hell? Well, when we back up and we look at who it is that's doing this, well, this is the publication of the Watchtower, Jehovah's Witnesses. And so how comfortable would you be opening that up and getting the truth about hell from this particular religious group? But at least I find it interesting that they felt like this would be a good title for a journal, because there is a lot of misinformation out there about hell. And then in another newspaper article, hell makes a comeback. Theologians struggle to explain why more Americans believe in eternal damnation. This article notes that there was a slight rise in the number of Americans that believe in hell. So while the Catholic Church was making a move away from a literal view of hell, denominationalism as a whole, though, was seeing a slight rise in the number of people who believed in hell. But that's a little bit misleading, and we don't have time to read the whole article. It was rather a lengthy article that was based in a U.S. News and World Report study. And that is that more people believe in hell, but those more people that believe in hell are not believing in a literal hell. They're not believing in a literal place of torment, or believing that one's going to remain in any particular place of punishment for eternity. So there was not, in other words, there was not a return to what the Bible teaches about hell, but just there were more people that believed there's a good chance there's going to be some kind of punishment of some kind. And then in another newspaper article that was a spin-off of the U.S. News and World Report study, religion takes another look at the concept of hell. Some of the quotes in this, I believe, are very revealing as to where at least Americans are in thinking about this concept of hell. One of the quotes, in many churches, one finds little talk these days about a literal punitive hell as a real possibility after death. Now, I believe that this would be a true statement when you're talking about denominationalism as a whole. There's going to be very little discussion, talk, sermons about hell, at least the idea of a literal hell, a punitive hell, as a real possibility after death. The percentages of those that think it's a real possibility are very small. A quote from one of the ministers that was revealed says, "My congregation would be stunned to hear a sermon on hell. Her parishioners," she says. Now that told us a little something right there. So we've got this congregation with a woman preacher. Her parishioners, she says, are, now get this, upper middle class, well-educated, critical thinkers who view God as compassionate and loving, not someone who is going to push them into eternal damnation. All right, so similar to what we were seeing with the Catholic view, well-educated critical thinkers are not going to arrive at a view that God is going to punish anyone with eternal damnation. The article also notes that in this particular church, those that attended that church would be stunned to hear a sermon on hell. So I don't know what's been your experience and whether there's been a sermon or a study or something like that done, but generally speaking, in the churches of Christ, this is probably still true. And that is that hell is not a topic that we discuss, and if we do, we discuss it usually not in the kind of depth that we're going to be looking at it in this class, but it's certainly not a topic that's one of our favorites, and I suspect that there were probably none of you that said, "I can't wait to get to class tonight so we could talk about hell." It's just not something that we're going to get all that pumped up about. But nevertheless, it is a biblical doctrine, and it's a study that is most important for us to be looking at. But anyway, the point is that hell's become kind of a mum topic in the churches. We want to hear about love. We want to hear about grace. We want to hear about mercy. We want to hear about forgiveness. We don't want to hear about punishment. And also, isn't it interesting that the topic is tied to intellect? The smarter you are, the less likely you are to believe in a literal hell. And that ought not to surprise us, because even the Apostle Paul noted that the intellectuals of his day had difficulty with the truth of the gospel in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. So we go on and look at some other aspects of this particular article. It said, "Now, to many modern scholars, a literal hell is part of an understanding of the cosmos that just doesn't exist anymore," said Stephen Patterson, professor of New Testament at Eden Theological Seminary in St. Louis. All right, so it's a literal hell is just not a part of our understanding of things. Mankind does have the tendency to exalt itself, and I believe this is an example of that. When it comes to the subject of hell, we seem to have the idea that we can just wash it away, we can reason it away. Even some evangelicals who generally take a more literal approach to biblical teaching view hell as, quote, "a blemish to be covered up by the cosmetic of divine love." Now, this was a quote from Douglas Grudius, who right here in Denver at the Denver Seminary, which is a conservative Baptist seminary, but this is the way he describes it. Of course hell is not a popular topic. It makes us cringe. It makes us uncomfortable. It frightens us. Therefore, what do we do with it? Well, we want to do the same thing that someone might do with a blemish. They want to cover it up with makeup. Well, according to Grudius, what's happening is, well, they're covering it up with the God's divine love. But the truth of the matter is the blemish is still there. The subject of hell is still there no matter how much we may try to ignore it or cover it up. And it is true it's a politically incorrect topic. No doubt about that. I don't know that anybody would deny that. I guess Paul would be saying that in using the language that he uses in 2 Timothy chapter 4 that hell is an out-of-season topic. And it most certainly is an out-of-season topic right now. But what was Timothy supposed to do with those topics that were out of season?
Preach it.
Supposed to preach it. Out of season or not doesn't change the fact that God's preachers are still called upon to preach it in season and out of season. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 2 and following. Another part of this article said, in increasing secular American culture, hell has become about as politically incorrect a concept as one can find. So there's no doubt that it certainly has become this out-of-season topic. I don't know if any of you had a chance to see the news or maybe even read this particular news story. Men drilling deep into the earth find open cavern. They hear screams from down below. Did you hear about this story?
No, I didn't hear about it. We didn't. That's not one of our wells.
Well, supposedly they record these screams of all these people that are down in hell, and the article went on to say that all of these people went to church that following Sunday and repented. I guess it kind of frightened them, thinking, well, maybe there really is something to this.
That's the stones crying out.
Yeah, maybe something. Well, this kind of sensationalism won't create a genuine belief in and fear of eternity in hell. Only a conviction that the Bible is God's revelation to man is going to be able to do that. I believe in hell not because guys heard screams coming out of a cavern, but I believe in hell because the Bible teaches about hell. The Bible describes hell as a very real place. In a Gallup poll, Americans were polled, and I don't know if you're going to be able to make out all of the numbers, but they found that 89% of Americans believe in heaven, and only 73% believe in some kind of hell. However, that figure, even at 73%, is misleading because apparently there's a fairly large percentage of these that believe in this hell on earth idea as well. But when hell is defined as an actual location, a place of torment where people will be sent, only 3 in 10 adults believed that there really was such a place. Most Americans believe that Satan is only a symbol for evil. Only 27% strongly believe that Satan is real, according to religious belief, a study that was done in 2001. Now, so when you look at this, going from right to left, in 1952, there were a little over 70% that believed in heaven and less than 60% that believed in hell. 1961, the belief in both heaven and hell went down to 68% for those that believed in heaven, to 52% for those that believed in hell. And then, as evangelicalism started to make its way in the religious scene, then the belief in both heaven and hell was impacted. But interestingly enough, there was a rise, about a 5% rise in people that believed in heaven, but there was a drop in the number of people that believed in hell from 1961 to 1981. And then from 1981 to 1990, you can see there was a significant rise in both categories. Now 60% believed in hell, and almost 80%, 78% of people believed in heaven. That was a Gallup poll in 1990. All right, now when we look at this particular survey in a little bit more detail, believers in 1990, again, starting on the right and then moving left, those that had no religious conviction whatsoever, were not affiliated with any kind of religious group at all, 45% of those believed in heaven, and 32 or 33% believed in hell. Evangelicals were clearly the highest of all of the religious groups. 91% of evangelicals believed in heaven, and 80% believed in hell. Catholic Church was about 10% less in the belief of heaven. About 80% of Catholics believe in heaven, and only about 55% of Catholics believed in hell. Again, this is in 1990. And then Protestants, separate from evangelicals, this would be about 83% that believe in heaven, and a little over 60% that believe in hell. To my knowledge, the Churches of Christ have never been polled specifically with these kind of questions, but it would be curious to me to know where among our own fellowship we stand. Now, I would suspect that we would be somewhere in the evangelical range, but maybe even higher percentages, I would hope, in both categories, that it would be 100% both heaven and hell, but that's probably unrealistic. And then another survey that was done asked people, do you have an excellent or a good chance of going to heaven or hell? Now, those that had no religion, 61% said they had an excellent chance of going to heaven. Now, these are people that aren't going to any church. They're not any kind of religious affiliation at all, but 6 of 10 believe they're still going to heaven. Evangelicals was almost 90% believed that they were going to go to heaven. Catholic was less, about 75%, and Protestants, about 80% of them believed that they had a good chance or an excellent chance of going to heaven. When asked the same question, do you have an excellent or a good chance of going to hell, those that were no religion at all, only 8% said that they have an excellent or good chance of going to hell. Evangelicals was 2%, Catholics were 5%, Protestants were 4%. So you can see that very, very small percentage of Americans, regardless of whether they're religious or not, believe that they're going to go to hell. Maybe they don't even believe there is such a place. All right, moving on then to another part of our study is the historical concept of hell. Before we do that, anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, somebody in this class.
If they don't believe in a literal hell, why do they believe in literal heaven? Or do they?
Yeah, they do believe in a literal heaven. And I think it's a doctrine of convenience that they want to believe that something good is awaiting them virtually no matter what they do with their life. And there are so many people that define their lives as, I'm a good person. Yeah, maybe I do smoke, and maybe I do drink, and maybe I do cheat on my taxes, but, I'm not any worse than anybody else, and so why shouldn't I have a chance of making it to heaven? So there's that kind of perspective, and, you want to believe, whether you've got the evidence to back it up, but you want to believe only good things are going to happen for you. So, yes.
What was the fourth view? It begins with C-O-N.
When we were talking about the book, it was conditional.
Thank you.
Yeah. Some other questions? Anybody? The history of the concept of hell begins with a study of a particular Hebrew word, which you're probably familiar with. It's just the word was transliterated into an English word. Sheol is the word, and that's the word that occurs in most of our Old Testaments. Fundamentally, Sheol is a place, one beneath the earth's surface, to which people descend at death. Now, this is very generic, but Sheol is kind of like the grave. And so someone dies, where is it that they go? Well, we say they go to the grave. And the grave is pretty much a nondescript, even in English, it's kind of a nondescript word that doesn't indicate anything as far as there being life beyond the grave. It's just a person dies, we stick them in the ground, and that's that. The Old Testament word Sheol did have a little bit more theology to it than just a place in the ground where you would put a body. It was a place that a person could go while they were still alive. And then the New Testament counterpart to the word Sheol, the Hebrew Sheol, is Hades. That's the Greek word. And again, we've made an English word out of that. And Hades does not mean hell, as unfortunately some translations have so translated it. The King James translated it hell, and the English Standard Version in 16, some of you might have ESV, it translated the word Hades as hell. Well, Hades is not hell. Hades is the realm of the dead, and Jesus, according to Revelation 1:18, holds the keys to death and Hades. And so the idea that the realm of the dead, who's really controlling what's going on in this realm of the dead? Well, Jesus does. And John says in the Revelation that Jesus has the keys to Hades. Then that indicates that it's kind of like a locked place of which Jesus has the keys, and he can unlock the door, and then those that are in Hades are going to be released. And we already know that that describes what we'll see in other places, like in Matthew 25. They're released to what? Well, they're released to a judgment day, and that judgment day will be the separation of the sheep and the goats, the good and the evil, and then eternity will begin with people in eternity in heaven with God or in hell. All right, so that's what this particular word means. And there are a lot of occurrences of the word Sheol in the Old Testament, and so this is a very surface look at this particular word. But once again, fundamentally, it's just beneath the earth's surface when people descend at death. The Bible describes Sheol as a place where people have no knowledge of what's going on the earth, which is interesting because there's still a hint that even though they're in this grave, there's still some consciousness. Not consciousness about what's going on earth, but they still are very much alive. Then when we get to some of the New Testament words, we have the word abyss. In the New Testament, abyssos is the prison for the demons. Luke 8, verse 31, Revelation 9, 1 and 2. It's closed, but according to the text in Revelation, it's got subterranean fires that rise from this awful place. It's called the abyss. It's ruled by a prince, not Satan. Some commentators think that the one that rules the abyss is actually someone that's on God's side. It's a good angel that God has put in charge. Some commentators see that as one of the workers of Satan. But I think the text leans toward the first view, that's the prince that rules it actually is someone working by God. Some say that's Jesus that's being described. Weird creatures emerge from it, Revelation 9:3, as does the beast, the animal, the beast, the Antichrist, Revelation 11 and 17 describe that. So the abyss in the Revelation is a very weird place, and we don't read about the abyss outside of Revelation except that one reference in Luke 8. And so it's just described as a place that seems to be reserved not for people, but for the demons, the workers of Satan. And according to Revelation chapter 20, even Satan is bound there for the 1,000 years during that 1,000-year reign of Christ. Now, not wanting to get too much into previous classes, although we didn't really talk about this particular aspect, we're in the 1,000-year reign now. And now that we're in the 1,000-year reign, then this passage is describing that Satan is in this particular place, bound and limited on what he can do. And Revelation chapter 20 then describes a time when Satan is going to be released from this place, and then the battle will ensue, where there's not really a battle. Satan and all of his workers surround the people of God. Fire comes, consumes them all, and that's that. Well, supposedly, that's describing the great battle of Armageddon, but when you read the text of Revelation chapter 20, there never is a battle. They have marshaled their forces to come up against the people of God, but then God sends fire, consumes them all, and that's that. That's the end of it. And so there is no Armageddon. There is no battle that ever takes place. So that's what we're reading about the idea of the abyss. Now, the term abyss occurs 9 times in 5 different passages, and that is described as the place to which demons are going to be sent. Actually, there is another place of Romans 10 and verse 7. The opposite, it's translated the deep, and it's the opposite of heaven, the one that's above the earth, the other below the earth. And when you look at the Revelation, it's the idea of this long shaft that is leading down to some very awful place, and Satan is chained and thrown there, and so forth. Now, this is basically all the New Testament data that we have to work with. And so, by piecing together the pieces that we're getting from the New Testament, the abyss is apparently the prison of demons, fallen angelic beings. Some Jews believe that demons were fallen angels, while others distinguish them from being their offspring. And so we say, well, who are the demons? Well, the demons, basically, there are 2 theories: bad people or bad angels. And that's pretty much it. There's not anybody that was ever created a demon, but they became a demon either from the angelic forces or from human forces. And I've actually got a series on that, angels and demons. Maybe sometime in the future, if you're interested, we could do a study on that. But Luke in 8:31, he describes the fear of the demons. They wanted to remain free. They did not want to be placed in prison. And so they're appealing to Jesus to please not send them to this place. Jesus apparently allows them freedom because the time of judgment has not yet arrived. Likewise, it explains why Satan is imprisoned in the abyss, for it's the standard place to imprison such beings. And when we look at those texts in Revelation, in the final 2 chapters in Revelation, chapters 21 and 22, we don't read anything else about the abyss because it's no longer needed. After Revelation 20, there's no need for a prison because now the judgment's going to be meted out. The final judgment has arrived, and both the devil and those that belong to him are cast into their final place of torment, and the Revelation describes that as the lake of fire. So that's where they go. The abyss apparently no longer is needed, no longer exists from that point on. All right, I can see that it's time for us to to quit for today. Look forward to continuing this study next Wednesday night. Good to see everybody, and I hope that the rest of your week is a good one. Thanks for, Cindy, good to see you too.
Good to see you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank
What's going on? I'm gonna enjoy a whole lot more than that.